again. The God team, Lynn and me. She's sitting in a higher chair, so she looks taller, bigger than me.
Actually, I'm not, but it just looks that way. And I lost my glasses. One of our listeners or viewers got in touch with me and told me I looked like a granny. So I tried to get rid of, although I am a granny, I tried to get rid of the granny look. Today we're going to be talking a little about maintaining equilibrium in marriage when part of that marriage, when one of the partners is a clergyman. And it goes across the board. Protestants, ministers, rabbis, priests, they all share the same joys and sorrows in marriages, the same experiences. Many of the experiences are the same. In the Orthodox clergy, there's the added ethnicity factor, which brings in a cultural aspect. And also, a lot depends on the clergyman that you're married to and how he decides his vocation is necessary, what he decides he needs to do to maintain his priesthood. It happened that my husband was a very ambitious, very workaholic type. So in the early years, there were no real time for family. We tried to make it, but he was so conscientious and so devoted that family really did come second. Maybe not in his head, but practically that's what happened. And as far as being the wife of a clergyman, I learned in later years that people will only expect from you what you lead them to believe they can expect. In the early years, I thought it was my duty to help my husband, especially as having gone to seminary. I thought that I was super ultra equipped to help, so I was very active in taking over Sunday school and working with teenage Sunday school classes, having plays for the young people and so forth. Those were in the early years, and I worked they got two for the price of one. I worked just as hard as my husband did in the parish, and felt often neglectful of my children. So that was a downside. On the upside, some of the most wonderful people I've met in the world, I've met through being involved in the church. And some of the stinkers, met a few stinkers too. The church draws lots of different types of people for lots of different reasons, and they're not always altruistic. Would you agree?
Yeah, we were subjected to, oh my God, when we first came to Phoenix, we got up one morning and the parish council was playing cards in our kitchen and drinking coffee, and we walked in and they said, "Oh, you want a cup of coffee?" Like it was normal that they could be at our house. And when we were in Toledo, we had an open house and we had 3 little kids. I guess they were playing with the pots and pans, and all these people started yelling, "The priest kids are destroying our pots and pans." And how many crazy calls did you get?
Oh, if I could do one whole session on the telephone calls that come into a priest's house, to a clergyman's house, the kinds of things that people are asking and demanding and wanting to know, and the advice that you get as to how to live your life in a more modest or more orthodox or more appropriate way for how they're thinking. You can't adjust to everyone's thinking, and at the beginning I was 19 years old, and I thought I should. I thought I should be doing what everybody thought I should be doing. So we entertained the board, we entertained parishioners quite often.
And bishops.
And we allowed them into our life and asked for their advice, which very often we were sorry we had done. Your children too come in for a lot of criticism. They're expected to be little perfect people, and they're kids. You know, the priest kids are bad if they're screaming during liturgy. He would go by for the great entrance, and my eldest was a 2-year-old. Hi, Poppy, and you can be criticized for that, for impiety, for letting your child, for not disciplining your child. So there are a lot of, and these things, these criticisms, and you're loved for no reason at all. This was the thing that strikes me the most. You can walk into a parish and be automatically loved. They don't know you. They just are prepared to love you. Or you can walk into a parish and same situation, and they don't like you. They don't want you. They've heard things about you which are absolutely not true. But they've heard things and they don't want you there. They're leery that you're going to try and change their whole world. They've got this little bag of candy in their church and they don't want to share it with anybody. They don't want change. Would you agree on that too? Yeah,
but what about the relationship between the priest and his wife? How in today's culture, what advice would you give to a young couple that are just starting out?
Well, yours is a spiritual mission, and I think that no matter what goes on, you should pray together. If not as a family, as a husband and wife, for sure. I mean, for sure you should do it as a family, but as a husband and wife, there should be special time set aside for prayer between the two of you. It's one way of, it's the spiritual opposite of date night, or not the spiritual opposite, the spiritual means of date night. You pray together and you start out the day that way. And that leaves less time or less opportunity or less tendency toward friction between the two of you, because you have prayed and you have asked in Jesus' name for God's blessing. And once that happens, you can't be refused. It helps. And this is something we've learned later on in life. When your children are young and you're trying to manage in the beginning a new parish, a new situation, little babies, and getting used to what the expectations of the women are as far as you're being part of the women's groups, as far as how much involvement you should have. You don't think about that as much. But it's important that you do. This is hindsight. It's important that you do because it helps. It helps neutralize the anxiety that the expectations sometimes bring on.
How do you handle, as a priest's wife, that sometimes the church family has to come before your private family?
That's hard. That's really hard, and that's happened lots of times. I think what happened, and they really believe that's their place to come first too. I think it was brought home to me most when my husband had a serious illness, and he wasn't even supposed to have visitors, but the parishioners insisted on visiting, and they would plow through me. It didn't make any difference what I said. Father wants to see me. He'll feel better if I'm in the room. I had absolutely no control. People would come up by the droves, and he was in no condition to be seen. I mean, he was tied, he was hooked up to tubes and so forth, and really shouldn't have had that many visitors, but they felt he's our father too. And I was completely shunned to the side by most of the people who tried to visit him then.
And how did you deal with that?
With a lot of resentment, with a tremendous amount of resentment. I would look at them and just think, what are you doing here? This is my husband. You know, I'm the one who's going to suffer if he dies. You'll get a new priest. I mean, this is my life and my future that's lying here. And I often became caustic, you know, and I don't regret it. I don't regret it because I was sort of fighting for my marriage. I was fighting for my rights as a wife to be at my husband's side and to be the first one that would see him wake up or to whom he would speak.
Did you ever feel as though you were never Lynn Gabriel, you were always Father Gabriel's wife?
In the beginning, I did. In the first maybe 10 years or so, I did. But I started working on my own in radio and television. Started doing some writing of comedic plays, and wrote for television, and then I became Lynn Gabriel. I had a radio talk show on a major Chicago station, and I got to be Lynn Gabriel. My name was known. I was known all over the city as Lynn Gabriel. When I went into a restaurant, I got a good seat because I was Lynn, not because I was Father Gabriel's wife.
Well, thanks, and thank you for listening. This is a slice of our life that we're sharing with you. God bless.
God bless.